In this video, I'll be going through the various different types of lights you can use in your scene. So if you go to the sub tab here, rendering, you see you have all your lights here. You can also go to create lights and they're all here as well. So I'm going to quickly go through all of the different types of lights you can use and how different they are from one another. So the first one we have here is the ambient light. And if I just turn on the lighting here, now this creates a very soft light over everything in every direction. It doesn't really cast any shadows, as you can see. If you have your attribute editor open, you can change the intensity and even its color, so I can probably turn it down a little bit. Always have your attribute editor when using the lighting, because a lot of these lighting can have various different effects and various different editors you can mess around with. Don't always go for the default ones. Again, like if I change the color, can really sort of change the scene a little bit. So just get rid of that. The next one we have is the directional light. If I just scale it up, and again, scaling it doesn't really make any difference whatsoever with any of these lightings. It's just to see the actual prop in the scene. Now, as you can see, when I move the directional light, it doesn't really affect where the lighting is. With a directional light, the way the lighting is affected is by its angle. So if I change the angle of the directional light, you can see how it affects the lighting. So I can turn it in different angles, and you can see how it changes the lighting. This is pretty cool for, say, a light source from a distance, or like the light or the sun. It's not really good for, say, internal areas. So if this was as you can see in this scene right now, it's kind of more of an internal environment, I wouldn't really use a directional light, but for outdoors it's pretty good for it. The next one we have here is a point light, which is kind of similar to the ambient light. It casts a light over every directional. It's kind of like a omnidirectional light, a bit like a light bulb. As you can see, if I move it around the scene, it changes. So kind of like the opposite of the directional light, so it kind of depends on where you move it. Again, if I move it over here, lights up that little area there. And again, always mess around with the attribute editor so I can change the intensity, turn these off, that sort of stuff. The next one we have is spotlight, and just like the name entails, it's pretty much identical to its real life counterpart, which is used in the theaters. It emits a cone shaped light on a object. It's pretty useful for, say, like a hanging light, or if you want to do sort of 3-point lighting, or like a desk lamp, that sort of stuff. You have a lot more options in here, as you can see in the attribute editor, than you have with the other ones. So the cone angle, you can see it can increase the cone angle. It's a preliminary angle, a bit of the drop off as well, so you can kind of see you have a lot more editors than you did, or attributes than you did with the other lightings. A really cool thing that you can do with point lights is create a gobo. A gobo is basically sort of like a filter used on spotlights, to create a sort of different effect. If I go to color, file, open up a file, I'll use the TIFF I made earlier, the chain link fence from the earlier video. Open that up. Now you can't really see it here, but if I render out the image, yeah, as you can see here, I've used a gobo which created this sort of chain link filter over the point light. Again, you need to make sort of alpha amount of transparency in order to create a gobo. This is a really cool effect if you want to, say, put like little bit of shadow on, say, water, or if you have, again, like the chain link fence thing, if you want to have that sort of reflection coming out of it, use a gobo. Gobos are really cool effects for spotlights. That's the next one. The next one we have is the area light. Again, I'll just and again, as you can see, as I scale it up, this actually does affect it. It's basically, as you can see, it is based on the sort of 2D rectangular source. It's pretty good for, say, fluorescent lighting or, backlit panels. It does take a little bit longer to render, but it does make really good quality lighting. And again, always sort of messing around with these if you need be. And the last one we have is the volume light, which is quite similar to the spotlight in many ways. except the volume light has a very specific shape. So I just turn it up a little bit, and it has a bit of a fall off as well. And again, you might want to mess around with these here as well. So those are all various different types of light that you can use in a scene. Play around with these, just make sure that you're not over lighting your scene. Again, it's all about atmosphere when it comes to games. If you want to do, say, a sort of like a horror type level, you might want to have very sort of low lighting, or depends on the direction. Again, play around with the lighting, play around with the color as well, which I'll talk about in a later video. But yeah, try out these various different lights in your scene, see what works, see what doesn't work. Again, it's all about experimenting, trying out various different types of lighting or even texturing. Just go out there and try your various different types of techniques out.